Hey guys, what is up? So today we are diving into the NeNe Leakes interview that she had with Bethenny Frankel. It is split into two parts, but we are going to talk about both of the parts in this video. It's pretty long, so let's just get right into it. So, in the beginning of the interview, the first question Bethenny asked NeNe is like, how are you doing? And NeNe responds that she's doing better, she's doing okay, she's been overthinking a lot because she's a huge overthinker. And I should notate that even before Bethenny asked NeNe, like, how are you doing? She does emphasize that she never really likes to have a housewife on her podcast because that's not what her show is about. However, she recently did have Jill on because they had some things to discuss. And the same thing goes for NeNe. Like, ever since she started her podcast, she's always wanted to have NeNe on, but it's kind of been, should I not? So she does stress that this is not going to be a thing where she's just going to be interviewing housewives every single week, but her and NeNe, they do have some things to discuss about Bravo, NBC Studios. So NeNe does go on to say that she is an overthinker, that she doesn't trust anyone, but that she's doing okay. So what prompted this interview was recently Bethenny or NeNe had responded to a post about Bravo, basically making sure that they are more aware about the alcohol consumption that the people who they employ are drinking, kind of just making sure that the people that are filming, the talents, making sure that they are not in a toxic environment. And so NeNe had responded to that post, and Bethenny also responded to NeNe. And Bethenny explains that she felt like NeNe needed an internet hug. She felt like here, Bethenny's able to vocalize the issues with Bravo, and they're able to do something about it. Whereas NeNe, she's been vocalizing her issues for years, specifically on racism, and crickets. So after they dive into how Bravo is implementing better workplace conditions, controlling cocktail consumptions, Bethenny asked NeNe to talk about her upbringing, like how was life when you were a child. And I thought this was interesting because if I'm being honest here, this is an honest conversation. I was kind of like, who cares in the beginning? But it was interesting to hear how I never knew anything about NeNe. I just knew her from Real Housewives of Atlanta. I didn't know her backstory or anything. So they do dive into that. So I will sum it up really quick before we get into the drama. Long story short, NeNe was born into New York, but she ended up moving to Georgia to live with her aunt, her mother's sister, because I guess they were just moving to place, and they just weren't how I viewed the story, living a stable life. So NeNe's mother felt like it was best if her aunt would take the kids, so basically NeNe's aunt adopted her and her brother. They lived in Georgia, and that's really when their life began. They still visited their mother every single summer by taking the bus to go see her, but it became a struggle at many points in her childhood because after NeNe's mother got married, had kids again, they would just visit NeNe and her brother as if they were a guest, when in reality that's like her mother, you know what I mean? So NeNe always felt like she wasn't a part of her mother's family. Feel me? And that's very understandable. So I thought that was very interesting to listen to because I had no idea. And I'm like, damn, that's really messed up that, yes, that's great that your aunt adopted you. But then when your mom figured things out, got her life together, got married and had kids, she didn't take you guys back. She didn't, you know what I mean? So I could understand how that would just mentally F you up. NeNe goes on to say that she actually wanted to start dating when she was 16, but her aunt felt like she was childish. But by the age of 17, she was able to start dating. She talks about how she was in abusive relationships. Even when NeNe had her first son, the baby daddy, that relationship, I believe she said she was in for 6 years. That was an abusive relationship. And Bethenny asked NeNe, does that baby daddy acknowledge that he was abusive? And NeNe goes, I don't think he'll ever admit that he actually was, but they still do talk. But after that relationship, that's when NeNe met Greg. And when she met Greg, at the time, NeNe was a stripper. She danced. And NeNe does talk about how she really enjoyed it. Like, she loved being in charge, you know what I mean, to sum it up. And she didn't have a problem with that. She was making money, she was paying rent, she was paying the bills. And when she met Greg, that was for the first time she felt like, oh my gosh, this is how I'm supposed to be treated. You know, like she talked about how they would go to dinner and, you know, she would never even think of ordering dessert. And he's like, no, I would like to see the dessert. You know what I mean? Like, and she even discussed a time or an outing when he was like, I'm going to marry you. So I thought those were very cute moments. You know, things that's probably in her book, because I didn't even know she had a book. Honestly, guys, all I ever really knew about NeNe Leakes was Real Housewives of Atlanta. I've never really looked beyond that. So it was very interesting to listen to all of this. Then Bethany and NeNe, they do recall a time where they met. I mean, they discuss a time they had a conversation on a plane. And then they also discuss a time where Bethany had invited NeNe to her party that she was throwing. But NeNe apparently, you know, she came with her two friends, left her two friends with Bethany because she had to be Andy Cohen's date for the night. And I guess they went to Anderson Cooper's house. So they do discuss about like the old days. Bethany discusses that's also around that time where she met her ex-husband. I mean, she loves her daughter so much, but she wishes she never met her ex-husband, but you know. So now in a podcast, you know how there's like a mixture of different conversations going on. So they eventually dive back into, you know, NeNe and Greg. So NeNe discusses or shares with us that when she married Greg, Greg was very supportive of her wanting to become an actor. I mean, when I say supportive, he didn't believe that she would actually become an actor, but however, he supported her financially with flying to LA for pilot season. And Bethany's like, but who were you represented by? And NeNe goes, me, I represented myself. Because NeNe represented herself, you know, it was tough in the beginning, but then she eventually met a casting director that was able to give her, you know, a few lines in some shows, but eventually she got defeated. She got tired of flying back and forth without getting like a reoccurring role on some show or a movie, etc. So eventually she felt defeated, stayed in Georgia, and then that's when she had spoke to a lady who was working with the Real Housewives of Orange County, that franchise. She learned that they were going to Georgia because they were going to film or cast a Real Housewives of Atlanta show, right? So long story short, she talks to this lady. They love her. This lady's like, do you have any friends? And of course, you know, at the time, Sheree was her friend. Sheree, she was married to an NFL player. I mean, she was friends with Kim at the time. How NeNe describes it, you know, she met Kim at the gym. Like, Kim was wearing like juicy couture sweatpants, cigarettes, wig, jewelry. And so she was like, Kim was definitely a character that the world needed to see. And after Kim walked in, the producers, everyone really loved her. And that's how she got on the show. So once the show started, NeNe does go on to share with us that season 1 of The Real Housewives of Atlanta was 100% real, like 100% authentic. NeNe goes on to say that there were no fake boyfriends, there were, you know, no fake storylines. Now when she looks at the show, everything is fake. People are making things up. It's not real. I mean, the show is just horrible. Bethany goes on to ask NeNe, do you think, you know, when the show first started, you felt pressured to be wearing like designer bags, felt pressured to appear as rich because, you know, out of everyone else, you know, her husband was like worked with money, but everyone else, they had like more money in their pockets, or their husbands did. And NeNe goes on to eventually say, yeah, she did, but she realized 2 weeks in that she really just needed to be her authentic self. That's what was going to work for her. And it did, because as NeNe reflects, she realizes, you know, the reason why people liked her is because she was the underdog. Everyone else was with their designer bags or jewelry, etc. But at the end of the day, you know, NeNe, she showed up to work with her authentic self. She didn't have that much designer going on, but she kept it real. And that's why she believes that the audience tuned in to watch her, because she was the underdog. As NeNe reflects on how the show is fake now, fake storylines, Bethany, she does chime in, and she says that some of the cast members on The Real Housewives took antidepressants. NeNe said that she felt low. There was a few times where she felt, very low on the show. I mean, they've had professionals come on, and NeNe does mention that one of the other times that she felt depressed and very low on the show was when Greg was diagnosed with cancer. Now, Bethany does go on to ask NeNe, do you think your breakup with Greg, did that have anything to do with the show? And NeNe does respond that her and Greg, they met each other years before the show and they've had problems. So she said no. However, the show did not help. And it's interesting because we learn that, how they got back together, NeNe and Greg, was one day, NeNe's picking up her son, and then the son's like, Mom. Greg says hi, and she's like, hi. So that's how it kind of started with them talking again. And around that time, NeNe knew Greg was dating someone, and I guess they were talking on the phone, and apparently he had to go, and he said he would call her back, and he didn't call her back. And NeNe's like, did he drown? So she drove over there. She saw that he was with another girl. She banged on the window, and they didn't open up the door ever. And I guess an hour or two later, the girl ended up calling NeNe saying, are you and Greg together? And then petty NeNe's like, yes, we are. So long story short, after that, NeNe was like, Greg, come back. And that's how they got back together. And NeNe shares with Bethany that, altogether, these friendships and everything, it doesn't have to be fake. They can make a show a really great one without all the fake storylines. And then Bethany's like, yeah, it's a battle zone. It's pretty much like the Hunger Games. You're always having, if you're not winning, then you're losing. And I may be mistaken, but I feel like she isn't the only one who have heard that recently from, who's worked with Bravo on reality TV, that it really is you're either winning or you're losing. People are either going to hate you this season or they're going to really love you this season. It just depends. Bethany goes on to say that you get rewarded for bad behavior, and that's the problem. If Jane had 20 margaritas and she's going off on someone, and then the producers, the team, they catch that, she gets rewarded. People are like, yeah, but what does that do for her mental health? What does that do? Is she addicted to drinking? We don't know. And I do think it's important to point out, because a lot of people are saying this on TikTok, Bethany Frankel, be quiet, because, no one's forcing anyone to drink alcohol. No one is forcing physically the alcohol down your throat. However, what Bethany is saying, and I believe NeNe is agreeing here, that what production or what Bravo NBC Studios is providing is an environment where you either have to win or lose. You want to be the winner, so you need to get in an argument with someone, and they're always supplying you with alcoholic beverages because you get rewarded if you are drunk and belligerent and go off on someone. Feel me? So I guess what Bethany is saying is that the studio is rewarding bad behavior and creating a toxic environment for people that they're going to have to live back on for the rest of their life. So towards the end of part 1, Bethany tells NeNe, you operate, and I'm paraphrasing here, with this I don't give a F attitude, right? And NeNe goes, well, look, I don't like to backpedal. I will definitely apologize if I need to, be that responsible adult. However, I don't really have any regrets, because Bethany's like, you seem to like this drama because I saw you on Carlos King, and you seem to, you're calling out this person, calling out that person. Why are you giving them that airtime? And NeNe goes, no, that's me keeping it 100% real. And then both of the ladies, they do dive into how it's really hard to keep it real. People don't actually want to hear you tell the truth. Recently, Bethany, she had a podcast that was dedicated to talking about Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce. I believe that's his name. Correct me if I'm wrong. And I guess whatever, I didn't listen to that podcast, but I guess whatever Bethany was saying, a lot of people were disagreeing with her. Shocker. I feel like, okay, real quick, I promise, but I feel like I am not saying that, and I reiterate, I am not saying that people don't have a really good reason to come for Bethenny Frankel. But what I am saying is that if you talk negative about Bethenny Frankel, you will get more views. That's all I'm saying. Now let's continue. Anyways, so they end that part 1 where NeNe goes, oh, this is, you have to, sugarcoat it. You have to keep it 75% Bethenny. So this is how you would talk about Taylor Swift and the guy. You would say Taylor looked cute. And Bethenny goes on to say, oh, I get it. I have to basically frost it, put a coating on it. You know what I mean? So I guess what Bethenny is saying, she knows how to talk to people and to sugarcoat everything and to make it all nice and pretty, but still get her point across. But she chooses not to because she just wants to be real and authentic. You know what I mean? So that really ended part 1. And you can really tell that it's going to get into part 2, which it does, really juicy. But you could tell that there is this narrative that's being played here, like it was during the Raquel Leviss interview or Rachel interview, where the whole premise or the whole moral of these interviews is that Bravo or NBC Studios have created a toxic environment for the people who they employ. So that is basically the theme of the podcast. And honestly, I'm one of those people who I don't necessarily disagree. So let's go on to part 2. All right, so part 2, they immediately start talking about the closet incident on the Real Housewives of Atlanta. Now, if you recall, there was an episode where NeNe was throwing a party, and I think it was like a no wigs party, just wear your natural hair type of party. And the girls, they were upstairs, they were in the room, and I believe, was it Portia? But it was some of the girls, they were like, oh, we want to see your closet, NeNe. And you can tell NeNe was like really not feeling it. She was like, no, don't go in my closet, don't go in there. But they walked in there. I know Portia did, right? And I believe another girl walked in there and then followed the guy with the camera. He starts walking in there. NeNe gets up so fast and she grabs for his shirt, and then rips his whole entire shirt. I don't believe the motive was to rip his shirt. I believe she even explains it, that he was a big guy and she grabbed his shirt and ripped his whole entire black shirt. And she goes on to say that it really wasn't that big of a deal. However, production made it a big deal, especially in the editing. They made it a big deal. And honestly, it was a topic that hit in the media. You know what I mean? Like, a lot of people were talking about this. And NeNe goes on to say what was interesting is that even like the guy that she grabbed his shirt, the guy holding the camera, he laughed about it. He hasn't said a word about it. He didn't sue. He was fine. And she goes on to say, how is it that Teresa can flip a table? You have women pulling each other's hairs. And no one's talking about that. But yet everyone had the time to sit there and talk about how NeNe didn't want this guy to go into her closet. So that was, to me, that felt like NeNe was basically saying there was some discrimination going on here. Because you had people reporting, NeNe, what didn't you want people to see in your closet? Whereas, why aren't we asking Teresa, why in the heck would you flip over a table like that? I will never get over that scene where she flips over the table. So I do have to agree with NeNe there. And she does explain that literally the day before, Greg was diagnosed with cancer and he was admitted to the hospital. NeNe goes on to share with us that she really did not want to throw this party at all, but production, they were pushing her to do it. And then NeNe goes on to share with us that everyone is assigned a producer. So she told the producer that, hey, I don't mind filming. However, no one can go in my closet. So she believes that the production told the girls to push the let's see what's in your closet narrative, so that way NeNe can get, upset and cause some drama. I also felt what was very interesting about this was when NeNe was on Watch What Happened Live, Andy Cohen also asked her, why didn't you want production in your closet? Like, was just asking her questions, and she's like really bluntly putting it, look, if I say don't go in my closet, because Andy's like, we did a poll today and it shows that more people believed you shouldn't have done that and yada, yada, yada. And she goes, I don't care what the poll says. If I tell you do not go in my closet, don't go in my closet. So honestly, I agree with NeNe. That's her house. If that's her home and she's saying what's okay, what's not okay, and they disrespected her home. So I agree with that. So now Bethany and NeNe, they start diving into how the show is built to pin women against each other, which it is. Bethany does bring up the Carlos King interview. She discusses like, why are you really must love this if you're talking about people. You're bringing up these girls' names and stuff. And NeNe's like, nope, we're going back to, I keep it 100%. You know, if you want to ask me something, I'm going to give you an honest answer. Now, I did think it was interesting because Bethany does ask NeNe, you know, what did you want for yourself out of this? Like, did you think you would leave Real Housewives of Atlanta, become an actor, live happily ever after? And of course, I'm paraphrasing. And NeNe goes, yeah, but it didn't work out for her. Like, she was booking these roles, but things just did not work out. And now we dive into why NeNe quit the Real Housewives of Atlanta. So basically, NeNe goes on to share with us that they were basically writing her out of the show. I mean, she was offered during the last season that she was working on 6 episodes, right? And she initially didn't want to take the 6 episodes because, like, you know, why are they writing her off the show? She even asked them and they were like, you're unhappy. And NeNe's like, how are you going to tell me how I'm feeling, right? So anyways, after discussing it with Greg, she does decide to take the 6 episodes, but then she realized, you know, it didn't feel like she was being treated fairly, because here she has been complaining about mistreatment for years, you know, because NeNe shares with us that anytime there was something going on, they would have a group chat, minus Kim, they would have a group chat, and she was the leader and she would report on the matter to NBC Studios or whoever was the head, right? And I say minus Kim because they felt like Kim was treated way differently than they were. Like, Kim never had to go on the trips and they had to. So they felt like they were being treated unfairly, right? And NeNe goes on to share with us that when she would go to bat for the ladies, not a lot of them would have her back. She would hear crickets. None of them would come to her defense. But she was the one that was pulling the shots, that was listening to the group. And she says she has the text messages to confirm that this all did take place. But anyways, she felt like she was being treated unfairly. She felt like it was retaliation. She doesn't say retaliation, but that's what it sounds like to me, because she was complaining. It was during the Black Lives Matter movement. Because she was complaining a lot, she felt like they axed her because of that. So the lawsuit is still ongoing. We don't know what's to come. Obviously, NeNe didn't get into great detail about it. However, she did share with us pretty much that's it. She feels like she was being discriminated against, and from my understanding, also retaliated against as well. Now, Bethany, she kind of shares her huge shift with the Housewives, and that had to be when Kyle Richards, when some of the OG Housewives, they threw Andy Cohen a baby shower. You know, Bethany decided not to go, even though she was invited. She did decide ultimately to not go because she felt like, you know, people were going to be kissing Andy Cohen's ass, so to speak. People were going to be like, Andy, look at me over here. I'm Andy's favorite. You know what I mean? And Bethany goes on to share with us that she did hear that a lot of the new people that were cast for the Real Housewives, they were in the back and all the OG Housewives were in the front. So she's glad that she didn't go. Now, they really do start talking about Andy Cohen here, because Bethany, she does ask NeNe, like, are you good friends with Andy Cohen? And NeNe goes on to say she doesn't consider them good friends because, you know, she's never been to his home, but she would consider him more than a colleague because, you know, they did go out a lot and they did party together and yada, yada, yada. So obviously right now they're not speaking at all. She hasn't spoken to Andy in 3 years, you know, ever since this whole lawsuit. And she does mention she did give him a call, but he did not respond. And he's probably really upset. So that's the status of their relationship at the moment. However, she does say, no, they're not good friends, but they were more than colleagues. So really, really, really great associates? I don't know. Now, Bethany goes on to share with us that there was 1 year where she was not on the Real Housewives and she got invited to Andy Cohen's Christmas party. There we go. And she went and she felt special because there was a lot of also like A-listers there and she felt important. And it brings up this conversation, whether you dislike Bethenny Frankel or not, whatever, let's compartmentalize that for a moment. It really did bring up this conversation of a power dynamic. Now, they didn't say the exact terminology power dynamic. I'm saying it here because Bethany starts talking about how everyone was competing for Andy's attention and she felt special. And I mean, even like her sitting at the reunions next to Andy, she felt special. Like it was all about competition. And to me, it really brought up this conversation here of power dynamic. Like, I'm sorry, I don't even care if it was whose ever housewives idea was to throw Andy a baby shower. That shouldn't have taken place, to me, in my honest opinion. And the fact that that was acceptable and that was okay, because you can, there's been plenty of reunions where I do hear Andy Cohen defend himself, and he'll say something along the lines of like, oh, well, Bethany did come to that event because she wasn't a Real Housewives, but I don't allow housewives at yada, yada, yada. It doesn't matter. I think there should really be a fine line here. And I think he thinks he drew one, but I don't believe so. I still think Andy Cohen has, as much as I do love Andy Cohen, I do think that whether he wants to admit it or not, he did cross some type of line. You know, there is a power dynamic there. He does know that people are competing for his attention. So I do think a lot of the things that Andy Cohen has done behind the scenes, like having people throw him a baby shower, because even though Bethenny Frankel wasn't on Real Housewives, there was a lot of the people who heard about it and the housewives got upset. So it just creates this dynamic, once again, of women pinning against each other. And let's be real, we love to see that shit. We love to see that on TV. But, you know, when it comes to Andy Cohen in the mix, I do think that there is some responsibility. He could take some accountability. That's just my opinion. But, you know, to each their own. And another important point that Bethenny does make pretty well is that Andy Cohen can't have his cake and eat it too. You know, he's considered a talent on one show or one franchise and then considered an executive producer on another. So he can say when it comes time to take the blame, he could be like, well, I actually don't run that. That's not me. But, you know, you can't have your cake and eat it too. If Andy Cohen at any point is in a supervising role at Bravo, then you are automatically ranked above all the Real Housewives. So I hate that because I remember hearing in interviews where Andy Cohen would be like, you know, I'm not the boss, I don't run that. But you can't say that's not your problem when you sit on a chair in your role, even like, forget everything else, even being in the middle and asking all these women these questions and stuff, like your role is still more powerful than theirs. It just seems like Andy Cohen has the power if he wanted someone on a show or if he wanted someone off the show, doesn't it? Does it seem like he would have some hand in the decision-making process of who goes, who stays? Because I just don't fully buy that, like, he just has absolutely nothing to do with it. Let me know what you think about that. But anyways, they do start talking about, oh, Bethenny, I thought you were Andy's favorite. And NeNe goes, I thought you were Andy's favorite. And it's just a weird conversation as a viewer to, like, what? Like, Andy Cohen is just a person. You know what I mean? Like, who gives a shit? It just shows itself that the fact that they had a conversation like that shows how fucked up everything really was. As a viewer, it was just a weird conversation to hear that these women and ladies were competing for Andy's attention, you know, and he was even compared to by Bethenny as a parent. Like, you wanted that parent's attention and his, you know, validation and yada yada. It was just weird. Bethenny goes on to say that she thinks Andy resents her because Andy was always supposed to be higher than her. And I can see that. I don't know if that's true or not. I'm not sure what evidence Bethenny has to illustrate that Andy feels that way. Maybe it's just a feeling. She definitely knows him more than I do. But Bethenny does feel like, you know, Andy resents her. And it sounds like she also feels like he's jealous. NeNe also goes on to share and says that she doesn't think Andy ever liked her too, and they feel like pawns. Bethenny even brought up how she brought her daughter to watch What Happened Live. Andy was asking her, like, who do you think is the ugliest? I can't believe that was an actual question. The argument Bethenny is making here is that, why would you ask me that when you know my child is here? And I don't know, because I also want to be bringing my child to a show that starts at 11 p.m. It's called Watch What Happens Live. Bethenny, you know, like, this show is like drinking and, you know, it's not really a child-friendly place. So why would you bring your child? Or you can argue, Andy, you knew my child was here, so why would you ask me that question? So that's really up in the air for you guys. I don't know. Now, NeNe always brings up the fact that, and it's a reoccurring point that she brings up throughout part 1 and part 2 of the podcast, is how she gets treated unfairly. Bethenny brings up when she was interested and still is interested in working with NeNe and working on some type of reality show, every single time that she would want to cook something up with NeNe, she would bring it to the, I don't know, the important people you need to bring it to, and they would shut her down. Bravo would shut her down. And NeNe believes it's because she's being blackballed. NeNe believes that because of this lawsuit that is going on with NBC Studios, no one wants to work with her. And it's really funny because Bethany and NeNe kind of get into, it's a minute, really minor altercation, because NeNe even goes on to say, like, I can't even get any acting auditions. No one wants to work with me, even at ABC. And Bethany's like, but I get NBC Studios, but I don't see ABC like blackballing you. And of course, I'm paraphrasing. And she's like, no, but every single studio. And Bethany goes, well, what does your agent say? Do you ask your agent? What does your agent say? And NeNe's like, nothing. And then there was like an awkward silence. And you kind of felt like NeNe felt like she was being attacked a little bit. And I'm glad that Bethany kind of pushed her a little bit, because I do feel, although NeNe may be right, I'm not NeNe, I don't know if she's being blackballed or not. It doesn't feel like, it feels like NeNe is getting in the way of herself, right? And all the proof I needed, because I was kind of thinking this myself, but the proof that I needed that NeNe was getting in the way of herself, NeNe is getting in the way of NeNe, is when she mentioned the podcast. Oh, you know, every single time we try to start talking about a podcast, you know, it just disappears. And I thought to myself, NeNe, if you really wanted to work on a podcast or do a podcast, all you need is a computer, and you don't even need a microphone. You can just, you know, use headphones. So to me, I think she's not educated on what it all takes to have a podcast. You know, to me, or maybe she wants something more luxurious. I don't know. But it does sound to me that she's not educated on all the opportunities that she can take. So I think that she just needs to educate herself on all the other things that she could be doing right now, while she believes, you know, the whole studios are blackballing her. NeNe goes on to say that when Lisa Vanderpump didn't show up for the reunion, they still worked with her. She goes on to talk about how Kim, when she walked off the show, she then got her own show. She talks about how Teresa, when she went to jail, they held up the whole entire show until she got out of jail. And yes, you can make that argument, but, you know, who didn't want to hear what Teresa had to say when she got out of jail? Feel me? With Kim, I understand that point, and I also understand the point with Lisa Vanderpump. She didn't show up, but then it's like, what do? Do you cancel the whole Vanderpump Rules? Because the show isn't really about Lisa Vanderpump anymore. Let's keep it real. So I do understand what she's saying, but I also can see how there may have been other reasons. NeNe also talks about a time where Vicky, she had an altercation with the company or with the studios, and she got an attorney on the phone. So there were, I guess, a lot of things we also didn't see behind the scenes that happened, and yet Vicky is still good with working with Bravo. So I guess NeNe may be right. I don't know, but I still think that there are some avenues NeNe can take, and it does feel at times that NeNe is getting in the way of NeNe, because she definitely could start a podcast if she wants to. I will say, I do think it was amazing that they discussed or talked about racism, and how NeNe does believe that Bravo, there are times where Bravo is racist. I mean, does she ever say racist? No, but she says with us brown girls, it's different than from the vanilla girls. And what's interesting is that NeNe, she shares that no one has ever, every single time that she's made a complaint, no one has ever emailed her, gave her a call, no one, not Andy. So that is very interesting. I'm like, is there amnesia, or is NeNe telling the truth that all the times that she's made these complaints, that one person picked up the phone, typed up an email, and sent it to her? To me, that's very concerning, because that kind of proves her point, in my opinion, if they didn't even respond. Like, what type of company doesn't respond to these accusations? And Bethany does ask NeNe, so what would you do if Andy Cohen or an executive, they gave you a call today? And NeNe jokes, and she's like, so, wow, you're giving me a call after these 4 years? But then she goes on to say, all she really wants is just fair treatment. And so Bethany's like, would you like back on the show? And I noticed how she doesn't give a hard no. Like, she does go on to say at the end of the episode that she wants to pursue acting, that reality TV is behind her, but I don't think it really is, because she's having a hard time just flat out, no, I'll never go back on there. No, 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 right? No, I do think that the door is still open, but she did express that she wasn't going to share everything that she'd want for Bravo. They know what she wants, and she says that they can do it. So I do think NeNe does want back on the show. I think she just wants fair treatment. That seems to be the moral or the reason why she came on Bethenny's show, to really express that she just wants fair treatment. NeNe goes on to say that there are a lot of memes out there that, you know, she doesn't get paid for. She doesn't get paid for a lot of this stuff, and she just feels cheated. You can tell, right? And it's true. Out of all the housewives, NeNe is correct. The one that gets the most memes is NeNe. Let's be real. Like, if we look at our phones and stuff, it's like on our iPhones when you want to send like a GIF or whatever it's called in a text, like there's going to be a bunch of like NeNe memes in there. So it's interesting how it works, because, you know, with the writer's strike and SAG, like, we don't know what's all to come in the future. So I do think that everything needs to change. Like, these people need to get paid for what they're worth. You know what I mean? Like, they do these episodes and then they're out there for the rest of their lives, and yet they've only been compensated like a little small amount for it. So I do understand where NeNe's coming from, and Bethenny. NeNe does go on to say, or does go on to trash the show Real Housewives of Atlanta. She's like, why are they even there? The show is boring. Who are these people? And I agree. I think a lot of people can agree that Real Housewives of Atlanta has gotten really boring, and it's just really lost its funk, I mean, its purpose. So I do understand. I just feel like NeNe wants to come back and wants it to be like season 1 again. If that's my, like, if you want my honest opinion, I feel like she wants to come back and be the #1 star again. So Bethenny does close up the podcast by asking NeNe, what mistakes have you made? What has been your biggest mistake? And NeNe answers that she does have regrets or mistakes as a mother. And Bethenny does ask her, like, you know, is it with the recent situation with your son that's going on in the press? And NeNe goes, no, I just, you know, not being there, going on auditions earlier in life when the kids were younger. You know, I do have regrets with that, of just not being there more often. However, no. But she does say that in general, career-wise, that she doesn't really have a lot of regrets, because those regrets were lessons. So, which is actually a pretty good answer, right? It's okay to not have regrets, because you live, you learn, you grow, you evolve. Now, Bethenny does ask NeNe, Housewives, it was stressful, would you go back? NeNe does. She doesn't give, like I said earlier, like a definite and oh no, but she does say that she wants to pursue acting and she wants to leave that in the past. Like I said, I don't really believe her. Bethenny does bring up the fact that, you know, NeNe hasn't been working on Housewives in like 3 or 4 years. So does she suffer from like financial anxiety? And NeNe does, of course. It's natural to want to know where your next income's going to come from. Bethenny does go on to ask NeNe, what are the roses of your career? And NeNe responds, being a housewife. And Bethenny does ask NeNe, does she feel that Andy Cohen hates her? And NeNe once again pulls in a really good answer by responding with, she feels sad at people who don't have a forgiving heart. And NeNe does go on to say that she doesn't know if Andy Cohen hates her or not, but she does reiterate that she does feel sad for people who don't have a forgiving heart, because she's not that way. And I thought this was a really good question for Bethenny Frankel when she asked NeNe, like, what is the thorn of your career? And NeNe does answer her family, because she loves her family, but they did not ask to be in the spotlight. You know, because the situation that's going on with her son, if you've looked in the tabloids, like, she didn't ask, like, her kids didn't ask for this attention. If they do something wrong or if they mess up in any type of way, you know, they get blasted on TMZ, NeNe Leakes, and then under that, her son did yada yada yada. So it's got to be frustrating to have to deal with that. I would have to say the last question Bethenny Frankel asked NeNe is, who would be your Rushmore? And NeNe goes, you, Bethenny, Teresa, and Vicky. And I believe when Bethenny asked who would be your Rushmore, like the people who are, you know, willing to get dirty, willing to fight, don't really care about what other people think. So now I would have to agree it would be those people. So that was the interview. Oh, and there was one more thing Bethenny did say. She did tell NeNe at the end of the podcast that to get back out there, do not like just sit, push through it, get back out there, because you can do it. And that was really that was the 2 parts of the podcast. It was a really good podcast to listen to. I feel like Bethany really wants, and NeNe, a union for reality TV stars, as there should be. And Bethany even shares in the podcast that the SAG, they are actually backing up the reality stars and getting a union to happen. It's not going to happen overnight, but that's something. So I think that's really great. And a lot of people don't like Bethenny Frankel because, you know, the biggest reason is her hypocrisy to the fullest. But to me, I compartmentalize all that because I'm not really a huge hater when it comes to Bethenny Frankel. I love real people, and I feel like despite, you know, all the hypocrisies, because I'm going to compartmentalize that, I do feel like she's doing something for the bigger good, so why not? That is my opinion. I know people are saying that she has like a white savior complex, yada 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 yada. I get it. I honestly get it. I've seen all the TikToks, I promise you. And if this horrible individual can help create a community for reality stars where there's a union, why the hell not? Like, I just think a lot of people are haters. I know it was discussed that NeNe felt awe about coming on to the podcast because a lot of people were texting her like, don't do it, it's Bethenny Frankel, she's bad news, she's a career ruiner. It seems like that's what people were texting NeNe, and she came on the show, you know, but you could tell that NeNe was worried that things weren't gonna go very smoothly, that Bethany was going to go out to get her. You know, there's a lot of things because NeNe doesn't really trust people for really great reasons. But overall, guys, I felt like this podcast was an outlet for NeNe. She was able to say what she needed to say without, you know, there was no fights, no confrontation, no coming for people. Yeah, she stated how she felt about the Real Housewives of Atlanta, stated it was boring. She did, I feel like, called out Kenya, but didn't say Kenya's name because she said, you know, they have fake storylines, fake boyfriends. But, you know, it didn't seem like she was coming there to trash people. It felt like she was coming there for herself, coming there to share with us, you know, what she's been going through, her struggles. So I really love the podcast. I really felt like it was a really good listen to. I was listening to it. I had like a 3-hour drive, and it was perfect because the first part is an hour and change, and then the second part is almost 2 hours. I did feel like it was really informative if you weren't following NeNe Leakes everywhere, if you didn't know exactly like why she quit and what she's doing, etc. But yeah, those are my thoughts. I do want to say, like, what are your opinions about Andy Cohen? Now, I love Andy Cohen, guys. I really do. However, this interview for the first time, it did get me thinking about there could be, at the same time, someone who you love watching, who you think is a really great person and is entertaining. That same person can also do something wrong, but they could still be a really great person. Because I feel like a lot of times on social media, we sit here, and this is my honest conversation, we sit here and we crucify people when they do something so wrong, and we fail to also just acknowledge, hey, this person isn't a shitty person, they did like a shitty thing. Feel me? So what are your thoughts about Andy Cohen? Because I'm very interested on, do you feel like he was in the wrong I feel like it sounds to me when all these girls are competing for Andy Cohen, it does feel like there's a power dynamic here. It does feel like he kind of plays with that. Now, I could be wrong, you know, and I do listen to Andy on like Sirius XM. I think that's how you pronounce it, Sirius XM. So, you know, I'm not an Andy Cohen hater, but I'm also, after listening to this podcast, it had me reflecting on, oh, wow, you know, there was a game being played here. So anyways, yeah. Leave a comment below. Let me know what you guys think. But thank you guys for watching, and I will see you soon on the next video. Bye, guys.